Good morning, dear friends. Dalid of, right?
He just
Monday, Dalid of. I think that's right. August 1st.
Yes.
Is my sound clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Monday, August 1st.
Hey, by the way,
Dalet.
I think it's today's Gimelav, no?
Is it Kimalov?
No, Dalet.
Hold on. Friday was Aleph. Shabbos was
It's Dalet.
Beis. It's Dalet.
Oh,
Okay.
I forgot Sunday. Yes, I'm sorry.
It's Rosh Chodesh August, though. And we're here to study the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. And we're presently studying Masechet Shabbos, 18th chapter. Okay, I don't know what I just did, but okay. 18th chapter. And we are on Kuf Chav Ches Amud Beis 128b. And we were talking about helping get an animal out of a well or out of the Amas Hamayim, what interventions are permissible, what interventions are not permissible, and is there a distinction, is there a difference if the animal can subsist, can survive while remaining in the water or not? And that was a discussion that we essentially closed out, reminding ourselves of an interesting line, Sar Bali Chaim Deraisa, and so there are certain derabbanans that the biblical concern of Sar Bali Chaim are doche, and we then we're now going to start a new conversation, the conversation about handling livestock, handling livestock on Shabbos, and a very important discussion. I'm sorry, no, we'll have a short follow-up, and then we're going to start a new Mishnah, which is discussing helping animals and then humans during child labor, which is an important and real, when I say real, I mean, and realistically relevant matter in the laws of Shabbos. So let's share the screen. Let's get started. We'll dedicate today's learning in the schus of our wonderful members of this Chabura who devote themselves not just in time, but in nefesh, even when they're on the West Coast or dealing with all the things that life has to send our way, committed to Torah study and to developing wonderful Chabura. Someone recently suggested they were listening in and they said, no, Rabbi, we should make notes of all of the chidushim that developed from our discussion, and we could publish a kuntris, we could publish a journal of our chidushim. So maybe that's something to consider going forward. So anyways, here,
Rabbi,
yes.
I just want to point out that Reb Beryl's on the west coast there, but Reb Menachem is on the west bank of the Hudson. Yeah.
I'm on the west coast of Israel.
Is that what we call it? All right, let's get started. So what do you do if your hen runs away? So you can imagine a comical scene of a person running after their hen. But what do? Can you chop it? Can you grab it? Can you push it? Can you usher it along back into the pen, or not a pen? What do you call it? The chicken coop. So what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said, you push it until it goes back into the pen. Again, this was a Mishnah we learned on Friday, I believe. So the Gemara says, let's read this very carefully. Doichin in, you're allowed to push it. Midadidin loy, but you're not allowed to walk it along. Hold it by, like hold it and kind of. I don't know what a good word is. Help it to walk, but there's got to be a better word. Anyways, Taneina laha the Taner Rabbanan. Indeed, there is a Mishnah or a Brisa which already essentially makes this point. What is that? Sorry, from a Mishnah, the Taner Rabbanan. Midadin behema chayav oif b'chatzer. It says you're allowed to help walk, foster along a behema chayav oif, domesticated kosher animal, a wild kosher animal, and birds. bechatzer in a chatzer, so the issue would not be carrying, right? We'll see soon. But you're not allowed to be medada. You're not allowed to foster the walking of a tarnagoyles. Rashi medadin loy. All right, the Gemara is going to explain why. The issue is not really about carrying. Tarnagoyles my time aloy. Amar bai mishum demafke nafsha. Because when you try to foster it along, it's going to fly up, and you'll find yourself not only helping the animal walk, but essentially carrying muksa. To shove it, that's not considered necessarily carrying muksa. But if you hold on to it to walk, it's going to end up flying up, and you're going to be there with a chicken in your hands. Let's see Rashi, what's wrong with that? Migbas atma min haaretz. It jumps or flies up in the air. V'nimsa zemetaltel. And then what happens essentially is you're carrying the muksa item, the chicken. What about geese? When you hold them with their body, they walk on their feet. Obviously, however, this may not be done in a Rishus Harabim. Other birds also can't be done in Rishus Harabim because we're a whole lot more concerned not only of even for a slightly less probable scenario where it would lift itself up. The long story short, we distinguished in the Gemara earlier on a difference between animals and human beings. A human being, we say chai noises asmai, we don't say so with an animal, and because the animal lifts itself up, you'll end up having yourself essentially carrying the animal on Shabbos, and therefore indoors in a chutzner, you can't do a chicken, and outdoors, Rashi says all animals would be restricted, but that's not the subject that our Gemara is discussing. The Rambam Nachsam Sofer points out has a very different take on this Gemara. Rashi explains that this word, demakpia nafsha, means that it flutters up. And so the issue would be carrying tiltal of muksa. That's the words that Rashi explicitly says. Just show you. The issue is carrying. Some cipher who's going to cheat for us, so we don't have to look in the Rambam. He says, Nira de Goris, the Mekapia Nafsha. What did he learn it? The Mafka Atzma Miyada. It schleps itself out of your hand, shall I say? The Toilesh Knafayim, and you'll end up plucking feathers. The Chassam Cipher continues and says, nearly the Inka Vanasum Klishas Noitza. It can't be that the issue is plucking, the issue would be not plucking because it's Ein Miskavin. The issue is that you'll be left with feathers in your hands. Those are also muksa. Mishum tiltul the darna goyles spherely kivan the MSU shmagbas atman artzim kain chaynos atzmai. The Rambam isn't concerned so much about the flying chicken because there the bird really is carrying itself. You're just holding on for dear life. Anyways, okay. So there you see, in the Rishonim, there are different ways to understand the Gemara, but we're going to stick with Rashi, which is the issue of tiltul of the muksa hen. Tanichada, there's two brises on the subject. One brisa says, you're allowed to help along, you're allowed to foster the walking of a behema chayva in a courtyard, but not in a public domain. V'ha'isha, but a mother and child, medadas b'nav rishus harabim. A mother or a woman may help her child walk along. And obviously a chatzar. We're not talking about a child that can't walk. We're talking about a child that's, I guess, beginning to walk, but you need to direct, assist. Maybe we're instilling confidence in the child. And as the Mefarshim point out, Rashi, I think, will point out soon, even if she were to mistakenly carry the child, which is not rabbinically permitted, she would still not be doing a malacha daraisa, because biblically we say chai noisas atzmai, the living, in a sense, are partners in the carrying themselves. You may recall we learned this Gemara probably 2 months, 3 months ago, maybe even a little longer. Time flies. Tanya idach, another brisa. Ein oiker behema chai v'chatzer.
Rabbi,
Yes.
In this discussion, you are consistently saying several times that the woman can help her child. The text says Bana, and the Rabbi Steinsaltz also translates it as the son. So this change of vocabulary, does it reflect your personal opinion, how to discuss those things, or a more general tendency to understand Ben as a child?
So first of all, I want to tell you,
there is Yelet that could have been used instead of Bain.
so I'll tell you the truth, this was not a conscious, I didn't sit down and say, oh, I'm going to change the translation from son to child because of a contemporary or whatever. My default understanding was that banim or bina, even though it is masculine, can be a reference to any child. That was my default. So I didn't give it a lot of thought. Are you suggesting that there may be a different halachic perspective if it was a daughter as opposed to a son, or you're just asking why we use a language?
No, it's of course there is as a background the difference in halachic applications to
they're actually
male and female children, but actually I am prompted by recollections that in technical books, when they discuss all kinds of issues in the past, they used the masculine third person, and then in my memory they started switching to she and to them, and I remember how I felt uncomfortable reading those texts, but it was a long time ago.
So I was not trying to take the text out of its literal reading. I am fairly certain that this halacha is a unisex halacha. It would be regardless of the gender of the child. But it is true that there are perhaps alternatives that we could use that would be more explicitly unisex.
Can
I
I
actually
interrupt
do recall,
for a minute?
Hold on. I do actually recall seeing somewhere. It's possible that there are scenarios where there would be a greater inclination to be, again, I don't remember, I didn't see it now, but I remember seeing in the past that maybe there is a diuk that it is bina, because perhaps there were certain Shabbos activities that were more a chiyuv on the son and a daughter, and then maybe that would explain why it uses the word medadas bina. I don't recall. I have to see if I can find that discussion. But my default assumption is that in the eyes of halacha and the intention of the Gemara is not to distinguish between gender. It's more a language that is gendered, is more inclined to default. But
what about a woman helping her child? What about a man helping?
So this is actually more of a interesting gender conversation. Again, I'm saying this without much authority, but just my impression. It seems like the Mishnah does presume a higher likelihood that it is the mother that is caring for a child that is the age of learning to walk. That is a gender assumption. Although also I don't believe to exclude a father's license to help the child along, but it seems like the cultural assumption is that it's more likely that the mother is going to be caring for the child at this age. Even in halacha, there's discussion about like custody. Younger children need their mother, and then when they get a little older, boys, halacha would be more interested in having them with their father because the father is supposed to teach them Torah or male instruction. And of course, you'll bring up the famous well, anyways, okay. No, there is such a thing as an affinity between a mother for a son and a father for a daughter. There's such an idea. But as far as in the times
Freud spoke about that. We won't get into it now. So.
He did?
But Professor, you certainly would be aware of the book Development as Freedom by, I think he won a Nobel Prize in economics. That was the first book I ever ran into examples being turned into feminine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's a great book, by the way, Professor. Have a look. You'll enjoy it.
Okay, thank you.
So, but this is, so you know what? I'm fairly certain we could find someone who will say that this was exclusively about a son. But in conclusion, I
But we
maintain
do
my,
see, for instance, we see Hashem poked avot al banim, ועל ריבועים. Banim is not only males, it's
right.
also females.
But there's a difference between a ben and banim. Banim means children. Ben does default translate as son. But the context, the way I understood it and understand it, is that it means children or child. Let's see the Rambam just for, no, there's no Rambam here. All right, I don't think I'm going to be able to deliver you much more scholarship on this matter. Let's take a 30-second peek in the Shulchan Aruch itself. If any of the commentaries reference a distinction between the gender of the child. Again, I remember some discussion about I lost the text.
It's Rabbi, it's interesting, and I don't know the answer, how some languages developed with Zachar Nekeva, with male words, female words, and then for Rabbim, words that were neither, so that you could tell whether you're talking about banim meaning children or banim meaning more than one boy. And some languages certainly have that third category for which is neat, which
yeah, French for sure drives you crazy trying to figure out if a word is masculine or feminine.
I believe, yeah.
So here, Doctor, I recall a famous, I think it was a New York Times article about one of these isolated groups of people on an island or whatever, and it was describing how, and I think today more generally linguists understand this, that you can learn a lot about the culture of a society from their language, or you can learn about the past of a culture from their language. So it's not just haphazard, but a language that places a high premium on directions was most likely a society that subsisted in a, and there was the discussion of the article, as I recall, was a long time ago, was about a culture that was so utterly in tune with directions that, no, he didn't have directions. It was right. It was directions. It was describing a person swimming in the sea and being attacked by a shark. And they remembered the shark coming from the east and coming from the west. He's in the middle of the ocean. He's being attacked by a shark, and he had utter awareness and recall of directions. And the idea is that depending on the vocabulary of the language, or I should say the vocabulary of the language might have an influence on how we preserve and record memories. And by extension, a society there's more. So for example, I know linguists will look at a language, and if there's like 30 different words for horse, you know that they were probably very into their horses. Or if there are many words that are military, you can understand that there was a more military-like culture. And so I'm not saying that gender too gives us any deep insight into a culture's background, although we can put two and two together. Now, just to tease everyone before we move on, Professor, so here we have a sefer which quotes a question that was asked. What about a son who needs to say Kaddish? And the long story short is he was inclined to be more lenient than a default opinion because it had to do with Kaddish. This moves a little bit past the core premise of our Gemara, but the point is we found a scenario where in dry halacha, and I don't want to, I know every step we take, we're opening, as Rebbe would say, another can of worms. But from the cold, dry halacha, Kaddish is something that a son says. Today, what a woman should do, I'm not weighing in, and there are certainly women that say Kaddish, but in the cold, dry halacha, it was a son's thing. So we could find a hypothetical where there might be an inclination to be more lenient for a son who has to say Kaddish, but I still maintain my position that we're not distinguishing between male.
Rabbi, to prove your point, the Eskimos are said to have 50 words for snow.
Oh, why? Because as a Floridian, snow is snow. But you have slushy snow and yellow snow and black snow and dry and ice and that would be a person living in the Northeast. Well, if your whole life is snow, right?
Beryl, you seem to know a lot about the Eskimos.
No, I'm just.
Yeah. Second reference to Eskimos, and one it has to do with where Beryl's staying right now. He's a little closer to the Eskimos than usual. All right.
Russians have 12
not
words for
in
stealing.
100-degree weather. I haven't thought about the Eskimos too much.
The Russians have 12 words for stealing.
For stealing.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's interesting? The Jewish language, the Torah has many languages for sin. Do you notice that? Chet, Osham, Pesha. And we have different words for atonement. Teshuvah, Slicha, Mechila, Kapara. And I'll leave it with that, but there's certainly something to be said about that. Tanya Chada, you can assist an animal in a chatzar, not a Rishus Rabin, but a mother can even assist their child, her son, in a Rishus Rabin. Tanya Idach, another brisa says, you cannot uproot an animal in the chatzar, but you could push it. Hagufa kasha. This seems to be contradictory. Amris ein oikrin. We said you cannot. I'm sorry. Akira means like you pick it up. You can't lift it, or you can't. So if you say you ain't oikrin, so then you should be allowed to foster its walking, which is not lifting. Well, later on we say you can push, but you can't be medada. Amar Abaye explains safe asal tarnagolas. The statement that says doichin, this is a tarnagol. The part that says ain't oikrin, this is talking about you can be medada. This is talking about behema chayav oif. So this line, according to Abaye, this is talking exclusively about chickens, roosters. Amar Abaye, one last halacha before we get to a new Mishnah, which will be very interesting. Amar Abaye, hi man, the shachat tarnagoilta. You shech the tarnagoilas. When do you shech the tarnagol on Shabbos? God forbid, no. Maybe on Yontif. But this has nothing to do with Shabbos. It has to do with shchita. Lichbeshinu lekari ba'ara, either shove its legs on the ground. I'm sorry, force its legs. That's a lot more of a delicate language. Inami neidel leho meidel, or lift it up. Rashi. Basically, either make sure the chicken, the rooster, has no leverage with its feet, either by placing it totally on the ground or by lifting it above the ground. But if you let the rooster's feet be, or the chicken's feet be loose, the dilma monach lulutufre ba'ara, it might dig its feet into the ground, its claws into the ground. And let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz here. And this lauke, the signs. I think what it means is that the chicken is going to yank itself. And so while the sheichet is shechting, it won't be a smooth and even shchita, and could cause the shchita not to be kosher. And it seems like this is brought halacha l'maisa. Now, but just before we're going to go to the Mishnah in a moment. I realized I have the art scroll here. Let me take a look at the art scroll and see how he answers the professor's question. Here, art scroll says a woman may help her child. So the art scroll takes my position. I feel very vindicated. There you have it. Okay. Although you say, yeah, me and the art scroll, we both changed the pshat to at least I'm in good company. All right, let's take a look at the Gemara. Ein meyaldin es habehema b'yantiv. One is not allowed to be meyalid. You're not allowed to birth. Well, misadin, but you can assist. The Gemara, as Rashi tells us, is going to explain to us exactly what can't be done and can be done. So behema can't be birthed, but it can be assisted. Umiyaldin es isha b'Shabbos. When it comes to a woman, if I was going to do what I was accused of, when it comes to a human, a birthing person, so then you're allowed to call a niyaleda, says Rashi, a midwife, even though it might entail melacha. We're mechalel Shabbos, umechalel aleas Shabbos, and we were mechalel Shabbos to assist the mother in labor, and the kosher nesatibor. On Shabbos, you're allowed to tie the umbilical cord. I have to stop here. Dr. Pasternak, are you on? On Shabbos, we had at our house we had like a group of 20, 25 young professionals, including a number of physicians, and we had 2 doctors who just finished residency in Chicago. And so I was reminded, Doctor, of your story, which I shared with them, because they were talking about how they actually did residency in Mount Sinai Hospital, which is in the south side of Chicago. And they were describing how it was a little bit challenging from safety perspectives. And so I shared your story that you once went to deliver a baby. I think it was in the south side of Chicago. When you came out, your car had its tires stripped. And when you went back to the house to ask to call a taxi, they said, "What's wrong?" And you explained to them, as I recall, you're muted. If I'm making any mistakes, I hope you'll correct me. You told them that someone had taken your tires. Here, I'll let you say the punchline. Oh, doctor, you're on.
The father said, "Oh, that was your car." So
And they returned your.
they returned my car, my tires.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, so were you in Mount Sinai? Which hospital were you?
I was at Northwestern.
Northwestern. Okay. So you were just doing. All right. So they were in Mount Sinai, which is actually, I think, in that neighborhood. Anyway, so I thought of you on Shabbos and I shared your story. All righty.
Now I know why Reb Irwin became a psychiatrist. After that, he tried to figure out what was going on in these guys' minds.
Well, actually,
Right.
I say these are very erlicha people. They own up to their mistake, and it wasn't intentional. I think that's a very virtuous.
They did tshuva.
Yeah.
Right.
All righty. Or at least they had a kar satoiv, which anyways is a beautiful thing. All right, so the Mishnah continues. The kosher nesatibor, and one is allowed to tie the umbilical cord. Rabbi Yossi says you can even cut the umbilical cord. And also any matter that's relevant for a circumcision, that too may be done on Shabbos. Let's read some Rashis. The Gemara, of course, is going to add. What's the issue with doing Leda, birthing a behema on Yantiv? So Rashi says the Ika Tircha Yisera, it's a lot of labor. It's labor intensive. Basically, when it comes to a mother, a human that's birthing, we can really do anything to assist. The Kosher Natibor, what is so essential about tying the umbilical cord? Shel Vlad of the child, Shu Aruch, which is long, Shem Lo Yikasher. If you shouldn't tie it, the Yichrech B'Shum Davar Yatzu Me'av Yagbiyat. And basically, we're concerned about the baby's well-being, and so we need to tie up and detach the umbilical cord. I'm sure there's a lot of relevant and contemporary medical knowledge involved, but for now we'll stick with Rashi, and then when the Gemara will ask our medical experts to give some additional insights. So now the Gemara asks an important question. The Mishnah uses the word sa'ad, assistance, but we need a little more. Can we get a little more specific? What does that mean? Ketzad misadin. What is the definition of the sa'ad, the assistance that one may do for an animal. Rav Yehuda Omer, Oiches es havlad shelo yipol ba'aretz. As the animal, as the baby is emerging, one can hold it so it doesn't fall to the ground. Now, I'm obviously very much not in my field of expertise, but I'm fairly certain that in the wild, it happens all the time that animals will fall to the ground in childbirth. And one of the wonders of nature is that they mostly survive. But I suppose yet one might be permitted to assist over here in such a manner. Rav Nachman Amar doichek b'basar kadei sheyetze havlad. Rav Nachman says no. Misad means to press the flesh. Rashi b'basar shel behema lifnim shehavlad boilet lechutz. I guess there's a way to put pressure to channel the animal towards the exits. I don't know if it's pressing or massaging or I don't know, whatever one would do with one profession we don't have on our group is a veterinarian. So maybe we need to recruit. All right, Tanya Kavasei Rav Yehuda. So we have two definitions: catching the animal or massaging, pressuring the animal to push the velad forth. Tanya Kavasei Rav Yehuda. We have a brisa which supports Rav Yehuda's definition. It says like this: Ketzad mitzadin, misadin. What is sad? What is the assistance? Oichsenes avlad shelo yipol va'aretz. You're allowed to catch the animal to prevent it from falling downwards. We're also allowed to blow in its nostrils to clear the baby's airways. And you're also allowed to facilitate the first nursing or suckling of the baby on Yontif. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. All right, so we have a brisa which supports Rav Yehuda that it means catching the animal, and additionally, we're allowed to help the animal begin to breathe, and we're also allowed to facilitate the initial suckling. Rashi shel imay b'tech piv. Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel answers, Merachmin hayinu al behema tahira b'yantif. We would have mercy on a kosher animal on Yantif. What does it mean, have mercy? So Rashi is a little more helpful than this. Ma'avin as vlada aleha. We try to cause the endearment. We want the mother to have to find ava for the child. Heicha avid, what do you do? So hold on. I believe what we're saying is sometimes it could happen that the mother seems to ignore the newly born child in the wild, and we try to foster a maternal instinct or activate or encourage the maternal instinct for the mother to care for her child. Heichi Avid, what do you do? Amar Abaya, Mevi Bul Shel Melach. We take a salt, lump of salt, and place it in the womb. That sounds like it's probably very painful. We want her to become aware of the pain of labor and remember that a baby just came forth that needs her care. Rashi Bulsha Malach Mulay Egraf, the Kayevla, a handful of salt which causes pain. Vizaycheres Tzaleda, the mother recalls the pain of childbirth, and Merachmas Asavlad Imrechakta, and then she'll bring forth or hopefully pay attention to the child if she initially distanced it. Umizalfin Meishilia al Gabe Vlada, we can also sprinkle or smear some of the fluids of the placenta of the afterbirth onto the baby. Uterachem olav, which I guess also seems to have triggered some kind of attachment between a mother and a child. This is only done by a kosher animal, but an unkosher animal not. And so you might think here we are simply, you might think that we are simply discriminating against a non-kosher animal. My time of the Gemara asks, in experience, it is not prevalent, it is not a common thing for a non-kosher animal to reject its newly born baby. And if a non-kosher animal does distance its vlad, there is no hope to restoring or activating the maternal instinct. This seems to be what they, and maybe this is so, I don't know, but this was certainly the fact. All zoologists knew this in the time of the Gemara. Alan, are you on? I don't think Alan's with us, is he? All right, this is a subject that I think Alan would have information for us, so we'll have to ask him about it tomorrow when he comes back. Let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. Behema sherichka v'lada mutal zalif meishlisa shel yasalav v'litain malay egref melach v'rachma kedesh terachim alav latmei also lasas king. Exactly what we learned. Let's see if the Rambam adds any details. No, seems to use the language of our Gemara. All right, let's start the next second. Any comments, questions, information that we could use here? Feel free to chime in. Let's see if Rabbi Steinsaltz has any facts. Well, according to Rashi, as we read, helping an animal be born is only tircha, which is the Rashi's strongly held understanding of all the Gemara, these Mishnahs in the Gemara. It's all about tircha. Other commentaries, says Rabbi Steinsaltz, believe that it is actually a biblical prohibition. All right, let's go back to the Gemara. The Mishnah says that unequivocally one is allowed to engage in any degree of assistance to birth a child, to help a mother in child labor. Mechti Tanalei. We have a Mishnah that says that we help a mother give birth, and we can also bring a midwife from anywhere, including travel and other elements of Shabbos desecration. So therefore, the Gemara asks, who needs to add that we're Mechal Shabbos? What additional fact is being added with the statement of Mechal Shabbos? Isn't it obvious? Hasn't that already been established? It's coming to add the following. Not only are we Mechal Shabbos in the immediate facilitation of the child's of labor for the mother and the child, but even more so. If she, I think, wanted or needed a candle, anyone can light for her candle. I believe what we're describing here is not just that she needs a candle, it's medically necessary, but she wants it. I believe so.
Really?
And if oil was needed for her lamp,
why are they saying a more general madlikim la'etaner? Why dafka chaverta?
Probably because we're talking about the realistic, likely scenario. You're asking, so what should it say instead?
Should say madlikim la'etaner.
Good question. I'm sure there is a diuk. Let's think about it. You have any suggestions?
No.
I think we're describing a likely scenario. Who does a person have in their presence in the child when they're laboring?
I understand, but so is the husband, so is the
husband, the
mother,
midwife, and the friend.
And the mother, or an older daughter. Could be a lot of people around her.
I'll tell you a contemporary Haredi diuk, Chaverta, that there's probably a preference that the people in the room will be mostly females. Chaverta. I'm not saying that's the real diuk, but if you want,
That might be a good comedy, The Husband and the Boyfriend.
Right. The boyfriend should stay outside. If she cannot handle the oil in her hand, Mevia bisara. Let's see Rashi. Bikapa, loy bikli de kama dafshir mishanina. Oh, interesting. When we say bring it biyad, we mean literally biyad. She should try to hold a little bit of oil pooled in her hand. And if her hand doesn't hold enough oil, ideally she should have it in her hair. Rashi, socha sarah shemen, sheba etzlai mikanachta ve'enkan chel Shabbos kimin derech haitzah. She should squeeze or extract the oil from her hair. Rashi explains, even though we're allowed to bring her oil and we're allowed to light the lamp, we want to minimize chil Shabbos, which is interesting. But if her hands and her hair are not able to transport the oil as needed, well, then you can carry it in a kli. So you're allowed to, but for this purpose, it seems like we would like to minimize chil Shabbos as much as possible. Doctor, go ahead.
It's a serious question. Is shaitel considered a kli, or would that seriously be under where you should put the...
I don't know, but I think it would fall under the same shinoi.
Right, okay.
I'd like to see, and by the way, Dr. Stalmer, maybe now we understand why it says chaverta. You're going to have to be a very, very good friend to dip your hair in oil to bring oil back for the woman in childbirth. Maybe chaverta. If you're not a good friend,
a mother or a sister or a daughter.
A mother would no, I don't know. It's an interesting. The language is certainly interesting. Amar Mariam, if she needs a candle, the friend lights the candle. Pshita, of course. Pikuach nefesh. Whatever is needed, we do. No. Even the chiddush is besuma. If the mother who's laboring is blind, so there is no substantive contribution of the candle. Maybe being that she cannot see, we'd say no need to do it. Kamash malon, we do whatever we can to calm her down. Savara, she thinks the lights on assists her friend in being maximally available. And so even though the mother who's blind cannot see, there is yet a contribution. And we want a mother in labor or a person in labor to be as calm. We want to, there's a lot that's not easy or great for a mother in labor. So anything that is in our control, we want to create as much of a calming, peaceful, conducive environment. Because, as the Tosfos points out, additional anger, anxiety can be bad for the mother's well-being. Bottom line is, there is a lot of value in caring for the frame of mind of a mother in labor.
I don't understand what there are all these stipulations. You can do it this way, maybe this way. If you're allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos, you're allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos. I mean,
our Gemara,
start looking, because people may start thinking, which way can I do it so I would be less Mechalel Shabbos? And then there could be an issue with helping the Yolidit.
Respectfully, our Gemara disagrees. Our Gemara, when it comes to immediate medical care, there is no stipulation. When it comes to helping calm her nerves, we try to avoid as much Chilul Shabbos as possible. But if it's unavoidable, one can even do that. That's the sentiment that I'm reading in this rice. Yeah. But yes, it is again another interesting thing. We'll actually hold on. Let's see in the halachic text if there's any elaboration. Let's just see the language of Rambam. In the context of bringing the oil, we try as much as possible to do it in a shinoi. Oh, the Rambam has a different pshat, which is very helpful. Doctor, you see what the Rambam says? Mishanim b'shasava k'gayin shetavi la chaverta kli toloi b'sara. She should have a kli in her, tied in her hair. So Rashi said,
she'll wind up catching fire in her hair. That's what will happen.
Rashi says, smear her hair. The Rambam says, no, we're not going to make someone be so crazy, but we can tie it up in her hair. Anyways, my dear friends, this concludes today's Gemara. Here we have it, a discussion about where we can and cannot assist an animal in child labor, in laboring, and then the expansive permission afforded towards a mother in labor on Shabbos. We could do everything. The only area where we seek some mediation or moderation is when it comes to bringing the oil. If we can do it in a way that's not Mechal Shabbos, we would do it. So, for example, in the hair or in the hand in a distinct way with a shinoi. And that concludes today's Gemara. Dearest friends, thank you all for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Good health and good circumstances. Tisku lemitzvot. Shkoyach.